when it's live?
There, the stream is live.
It is. Okay.
For those of you coming into the room, thank you very much for joining us. We're just waiting a few minutes for people to be able to come into the room, and then we look forward to getting started and having a chat with you. We'll just wait a few moments.
Well, where I'm from, New Zealand, and it is 10 a.m. on Friday, the 22nd of November.
Yep. And here in Queensland, Australia, it's 7 a.m. But we'd love to hear from you if you're coming into the room now. As Lucy says, just pop in the chat there who you are, where you're from, and what time it is. We'll just give it another moment and then we'll get started.
For most of you, it's the 21st of November, which is World Philosophy Day, a good reminder for us to be thinking, as well as there's all the other learning things that we need to do. And it's also, I think, International Peace Day.
Oh, is it really?
22nd.
Wow.
No, it isn't. It isn't. Sorry.
It'll remind me to get philosophical today.
Get philosophical. Ask the questions. That's what we need to do.
It's the end of the year, the end of the week. It's a good time to just stop, pause, and get philosophical, isn't it?
Yeah.
Hi, Anne. Glad you could join us. All righty. I think we might get started if you'd like to just pop. Oh, hi, Susanna. Hawaii. How lovely.
I think that's the biggest time difference between Honolulu and Auckland, 23 hours. Yeah. Okay, Karena, I think time to kick off.
I think it is. And I'd like to welcome you all today. As you can see, we've got the opportunity here to talk about partnerships. But before we get started, please, we'd just like to introduce ourselves. And before I do that, as is our tradition here in Australia, is that I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners on the lands from which we are all meeting today. I acknowledge and pay my respects to our elders, for they hold the wisdoms and the stories of generations. And if there's ever anybody that we can turn to sit at their feet and learn about collective wisdom and working together, it is definitely our First Nations people. Just to introduce myself, my name is Karena Menzie-Ballantyne. I'm a CQU lecturer. Now, CQU stands for Central Queensland University. Although these days here in Australia, we have campuses in every single state. We've got something like 20 campuses and hubs right across Australia. My personal work is in teacher education, but my research is in this field of global citizenship, global competence. We call it a rose by any other name because we know that it comes in many different forms, as it should be contextualized right around the world. I have the honor of working with many partners in my work. I work with educators in the classroom. I work with school leaders. I work with departments of education. I work with policymakers. And as part of that journey, I do a lot of work in, and I feel very passionate about amplifying the voice of the Asia Pacific, because I feel sometimes that voice doesn't get heard as strongly as some of the voices from the Northern Hemisphere. And as part of that, I joined up to the Global Citizenship Education Network, which is run by UNESCO and its partners. And through that, a few years ago, I met this wonderful, passionate lady from New Zealand called Libby Giles, who was working for the Centre for Asia Pacific Excellence. Some of you might know her for that. But the role and the work of the Asia Pacific Centre has now been passed on to the Centre for Global Studies. So I'll allow Libby to introduce herself.
Tēnā koutou e te whānau. I whānau mai a hau I te taha o te moana o te whanganui a Tara. I raro I te maunga o te ahu mai rangi. Hei uri a hau no Airini, no Wera, no Ingarangi, no Aotearoa hoki. Ki te noho a hau ki nai ene ki Tamaki Makaurau. Hei kai hautu a hau mo Arohaina te ao. Ko Libby Giles tōku ingoa, no reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. What I've just done for you there is called a pepeha. It's in te reo Māori. It's a way of introducing yourself and the your ancestry and the places that you connect to. So in this case, it's telling you that I was brought up, nurtured and surrounded by the water and hills of Wellington, the capital of New Zealand. I'm predominantly of Irish ancestry, but also some Welsh and English and 5 generations New Zealand. I live in Auckland. The leadership I step up to is grounded in a love of the world. My name is Libby Giles, and greetings to all of you, to all of us. Giving a pepeha or learning some te reo Māori language is one way that as a partner I can honour te tiriti o Waitangi. That's the treaty that underpins the constitutional arrangements of this bicultural nation. More important now than ever, when the gains towards redress of injustices over the last 50 years are seriously under threat. So it's important for me to stress this as a responsibility attached to me as a partner. My mihi, or my thanks, goes to the Indigenous peoples of the world, to every land that you are from, to the organisers, to Lucy Gray, to the organisers of this fantastic forum for bringing us together, and mostly to all of you for joining. Your contributions are so valuable to us. And of course to my partner in this, Karena. We have been working together in the Asia Pacific Network, and as she said, the work that I've done in the Centres of Asia Pacific Excellence have migrated to the New Zealand Centre for Global Studies, where we are pivoting forward to establish a hub of excellence that prioritises the Pacific, so often missing in the Asia Pacific. He waka e ke noa. We are all in this together. So you are partners with us. So I'm going to hand over now to the next activity for Karena.
Thanks. And as you can see on screen there, what that beautiful Maori expression means is we are all in this canoe together. And that's why we thank people like Lucy and the people who work with us, who give us the platform to come together to share information. I know many of you on screen and in countries where perhaps governmental choices are going a little bit more to the right and starting to think, is our work in jeopardy? We now more than ever, we need to work together and think about who are our partners? Who do we want to work with in this space? So just to get you to, waking up, because I know it's late for many of you, and having a bit of a think, if you could only choose 2 people to come in your canoe with you, who would you choose and why? Now, this is just a bit of fun. So you might want to I'd put my mum in because she washes my socks, or you might want to I'd like Martin Luther King in my canoe with me because his values are my values. Up to you, bit of fun. Just type into the chat, who would you have in that canoe with you and why?
Kamala Harris and Diane Keaton. Awesome.
Oh, I love Diane Keaton. She's one of my favorite actors. Thanks for that, Lucy. Great idea. Who else would you have in that canoe with you?
I'm taking Snoopy as my spirit animal.
Love that one. I must admit, my canoe would definitely have to have Audrey Hepburn in it. Audrey Hepburn.
Ruth Bader Ginsburg and Kamala. Nice.
Perfect.
Good choice.
Thanks,
Ruth,
Andrea.
where are you? We need you.
Yes, I mean, if you think back, I mean, I have a big picture of Audrey Hepburn up on my wall for those of you who might know her as an actress. But of course, she was in occupied Holland. She suffered all the atrocities of war. So she became an absolute advocate for children of the world. She worked as an ambassador with UNICEF and various other organizations. So lovely, Anne. You're bringing your closest friend and Michelle Obama. Yep. Yeah. Best buddies are really important people to have in the canoe with you, but I could sit and listen to Michelle Obama. Yep, absolutely.
That's really awesome.
Okay, well, if somebody pops into your head, oh, here we go. Patrick.
Oh, Patrick is a good paddler. That's good.
Okay, so we're getting good balance there, Susanna. We're going to have Patrick for his paddling abilities, and we love brilliant human beings. We often talk about that when people get hung up on definitions about, are we talking about global competence or global citizenship, or are we talking about intercultural or 21st century skills? What is it we're trying to achieve? And a research partner here at CQ, Miriam and I often talk about what we're trying to produce is just good humans. And I think when I see brilliant human, I think that's what you're meaning, Susanna. It's just a really good, all-rounding person who can engage, who can help, who can be part of the journey with you. Fantastic.
And sometimes I think we have so much, there's a lot of rhetoric out there in education about getting back to the basics and sort of leaving aside the nice to haves, but actually, how about let's get back to the basics of being decent human beings as well.
Absolutely. Well, if any other ideas pop into your head, feel free to put them in the chat. We will, as we go through, give you an opportunity to pop your answers in the chat. So please feel free to engage. There's no right or wrong answers in forums like this, and we would really, really love to hear from you as we move forward with our activities. We might pop into the next slide.
Yeah. Okay, so what's this all about? Like, why are we kind of engaging in this kind of education for global citizenship, sustainable development? Basically, we're all in here for transforming education for a better world. Well, we've got what we're doing, and when we talk about global citizenship, we're not talking about making everybody the same. We are talking about honouring our common humanity, but at the same time celebrating our differences. So this is not about watering down national or cultural identity in any way. It's about absolutely recognising all of those things and celebrating them, but also recognising those universal principles that bind us. We are in a hyper-connected world, whether people like the idea or not. There are some things that just know no borders. And so that's just how things are. The other thing I kind of like to draw attention to is that we have moved from an international environment to a global one, and so that's where the sort of international or the world stage is transitioning from that nation state, self-interested nation state only kind of approach to a recognition of the planetary interest. So it's from international to global. So international by nature of the first part of the word is between. So it's about us and them. Global is we. Not everybody agrees, of course, we know that, but I think in this forum we're probably multilateralists and get that. So it is that recognition of the planetary interest, and you know, Francois Hollande said on at the conclusion of the Paris Agreement, what brings us together is the planet itself. We're also in a polycrisis situation in the world. We've just been through, well, and still going through really, COVID. There's conflict and there's climate change. These are you know, huge crises that come at once. And in navigating all of that, the power of partnerships is where we see the greatest solutions. I'll just move on to Karena. So, in forming those partnerships, we need to work with stakeholders across all sectors. So educators, learners, people, members of civil society, the corporate world, government, academia, and so on. We need to draw together our complementary strengths to do this. We need to get out of silos. In teaching, we've got so much siloed learning. We're operating still in a way like a sausage factory model, where we're putting people through this kind of factory assembly line and spitting them out into their various jobs. Primary schools are generally, and I don't know how many primary school teachers are here, but they're generally much more global in their pedagogy and thinking, and little children, of course, are as well. But we tend to put them into silos as soon as they get older. Working with the international community, really, really, really important. And here we are now, speaking with members of the international community. Working with regional networks, which Karena and I have done a lot of, especially in this Asia-Pacific GCED network, and a recent regional dialogue that we'll be coming back to shortly. This is really about learning to live together and flourishing ever forward. It's about understanding who we are and how we can celebrate our differences and work together. So here's a nice little journey of partnerships. It's going to lead into something that Karena is going to talk a little bit more about. In early 2022, I was invited to join the Global Education Network of Europe as a global critical friend. They were developing a declaration on global education in Europe to 2050. So quite a remarkable, quite a big vision. And so what they did is that they drew in stakeholders from around the world, from various sectors, and the idea of bringing in the global critical friends was to get true global voice, even though it was a regional declaration. It was an incredible process, genuine. Our sort of commentary, our contributions landed up in the declaration itself, and in fact, the work of the global critical friends was to finish on the signing of the declaration in Dublin at the end of the same year. But it grew so strong, and we had ideas about taking it to other regions, that it's still going. And so we did get together at the Dublin Congress, where it was signed at a ministerial level. And it's it was a fantastic process, and it's been a powerful document. Within a year, or up to now, within a year, 18 European countries had adopted national strategies on global education. And I think to now more than 20 have. So that's been really great. As part of that process, we did talk about taking something to the Asia Pacific. So we thought we don't necessarily do a declaration. That would be for the stakeholders in the region to decide at some point. But where we did start was by having a regional dialogue that was held in June this year in Bangkok. And that was, the idea was that we would link that to UNESCO's recommendation on education for peace, human rights and sustainable development that every single member state adopted last year. So we did that, and that has also brought about a whole lot of new conversations, new partnerships, and we progress further as partners. And part of our working together and with the Centre for Global Studies in New Zealand is to build on those networks and prioritise the Pacific.
Okay, that leads beautifully into that conversation that we had in this region early this year. Now, just a quick yes or no in the chat box. I'd be really interested to know, we are now a year on from UNESCO adopting the recommendation on education for peace, human rights and sustainable development. That's its official title. Well, its official title is really long, and it covers things like global citizenship, intercultural understanding, all sorts of things, but it became a bit long to put on the document. So they called it this peace, human rights and sustainable development. Could you just pop in the chat, just a little yes or no? Here we are a year on. Have you heard or seen this document in your context, in your work? I'd be really interested to know how much exposure the document is starting to get.
Something interesting about the inclusion of global citizenship in the title text is that it's the first time that it's appeared in such a document and was uncontested by any country. Nobody argued its being there or contested its definition. So that's actually quite a big step forward for global citizenship and global citizenship education.
Absolutely. That's a really important one to pick up on, I think, Libby, because we've just been working with, I was just chatting to Lucy before we came on, that we were talking to teacher educators, about 15 teacher educators from around the world, and talking about terminologies and definitional debates. And the general consensus amongst these academics and these teacher trainers was it's really, really important that we do have conversations about where these words are coming from. Do they have particular origins or nuances, or sometimes they come with maybe political or social or economic intent behind them. We often hear that Vicari and Gardner examined the two documents and realised that a lot more terminology around common good and social justice and global citizenship sits with UNESCO, and more wording that is perhaps a bit more oriented towards marketplace competencies and skills sometimes sits with the OECD PISA global competence term. So it's important that we have these conversations. But as Libby picks up here, at the end of the day, what these teacher educators were saying for us was, let's have a little conversation about that, but let's not let it get in the way. Let's then move on, because what's so important in this day and age is that we actually turn these discussions, these theories, these policy documents into action. And that is what the recommendation on education for peace, human rights and sustainable development is all about. It is seen as a document that is for advocacy. Is that, if you feel that you need something concrete in your hand to be talking to your directors of education, to be talking to your politicians, to be talking to the principal in your school, to say, there is global recognition that this work that I am trying to achieve is important and is what's required, whether it's for a child to get a job in the global marketplace, or whether it is to give that child the knowledge, skills, values and attitudes to want to contribute to their local community. As Libby said, it is not a competing agenda with national civics agendas. It is not competing with the ideals of your local community. It is not trying to override your local culture. In fact, everything about the document and the work that it promotes is celebrating the local, celebrating what is unique about your context, about your cultures, about your religions. So using a document like this, to me, the important part about it is to give you a bit of a frame to move forward. But we know when we have these big international documents, we don't want to just adopt them holus bolus into our context without really thinking about what do they mean for our context. So as Libby mentioned, we all got together in Bangkok in June, and we had representatives from the Asia Pacific countries. We had educators, we had policymakers, we had UNESCO people, and it was sort of the Asia Pacific launch of this document. But we took it one step further and we said, okay, let's look at the priorities that are written in this document, and let's look at some of the ways that we can actually take action. What can we actually do that is relevant to our context, our region, to move this agenda forward? So that's what the roadmap is all about. Now, Libby and I will pop up our email addresses at the end of this thing. And if you've not seen either of these documents and you're motivated and interested to do so, I'm happy for you to just email me or Libby, and just because we love to connect. So if you'd like to, if you can't find them and you'd like us to email them to you, that's absolutely fine. Let's pop on to the next slide.
Yeah, I was just going to, just a quick thing there is that this is also, you know, good leverage if you're working with your policymakers or leaders. Although this is a non-binding document, it was adopted by every single member state, and that does come with some expectations, including potentially legislative ones. So, and a timely reminder at this stage, with 5 years to go to achieve Agenda 2030. Actually, this is sort of a good a driver for a lever for implementing global citizenship education, or education for sustainable development, or whatever it is that you're doing.
Absolutely. And I
think talking about context, there's in an Aotearoa New Zealand context, and the work that we've developed in the Centres of Asia Pacific Excellence, and we migrate forward with us, is that we centred the work on 3 big ideas: tuakiritanga, which is identity, hononga, connections, and responsibility. So, resources come and go, issues come and go, but there are sort of central, there are core concepts that stay with us. And so in the context here, what we're talking about is understanding who the global citizen is. Who is this person? And so sometimes we confuse global citizenship with overseas, with international exchange or whatever. You don't actually have to leave your own street to be a global citizen. It's actually about understanding who you are and the ground you stand on, and how you are connected to the rest of the living world and people, and where your responsibilities lie. So, you've got the blueprints of global citizenship are found in Indigenous knowledge systems and ancient civilizations. Since it's World Philosophy Day, I'll go there. Socrates, I'm a citizen of the world. He didn't go anywhere, but he knew who he was, how he was connected, and how he should live. So still an enduring symbol of critical thinking and ethics. It's a nice way to put him in. So the next activity is going to connect you with these big ideas a little too, and Karena's going to take you through that.
Okay, so as we said there, we need to contextualize this work. We need to think about, what does it mean for me personally, that identity? What does it mean for the context, the university, the not-for-profit, the school that I work with? What does it mean for my country, for my region? But we know we can't do it alone. Nobody can do this work alone. In fact, that is contradictory to the very nature of the work. So we've popped up a little slide there to say, let's think about, in advancing this type of work, what are the characteristics you look for in a partner? Now, that might be an individual partner. As I say, what was it, of all the people that were on that Global Citizenship Education Network, that conference that day, what was it that made Libby and I reach out through the chat box on the side to say, and it was literally, the words were, we need to talk. So what was it? What was it about this partnership that made it something that we wanted to work with? So can you pop that in the chat box? What are the characteristics you look for in a partner to do this kind of work? I mean, it might be sometimes as simple as, perhaps Libby and I reached out while you're typing there, I'll chat a little. It might be that Libby and I reached out to each other because she was New Zealand and I was Australia. It might have been a geographical connection that we thought, well, hey, even though New Zealand and Australia have their biggest rivalries in sport and all sorts of things, we are so often partners. Was it geography that brought us together? But also in preparing for this presentation, we think, like-mindedness. We have been working, I don't know how many years now, Libby, but it was like you get to a point that you go, oh, what about this idea? And the other person finishes off that idea. Is it something about
And
that?
the other thing too is that you can be, I'm sure it will resonate with some of you as well, is that you can feel like a real lone ranger in your own context, getting some of this done. And when you connect in regional or global environments, you realize that there's a whole lot of other people actually who are really just doing the same thing too. And it's really cool to connect with them. And it really sort of, it gives strength to what you're doing.
Absolutely.
Sometimes I call it my global family of misfits, because I think we get together and we all kind of really get what we're doing, and then you maybe go home and talk to your colleagues and they think, yeah, really, maybe not that interested.
Absolutely. I'm seeing these fabulous things come up. Oh, Samaya, how lovely. One of my PhD students is online. How lovely to see you.
Humility, transparency and good work ethics. Nice.
Absolutely.
Flexible, open-minded, empathy.
Willing to learn and grow. Absolutely.
Respectful of culture of people.
Yeah. I saw passionate about humankind. I love that, Maria. And I think that's absolutely true. Belonging to that. Yes, I think that's a great one, that sense of belonging. So, I mean, all the research around, cosmopolitan citizenship reminds us of that. And it's so true of the current generation that, and this is us getting back to, and I know it's a little bit of a soapbox, but too often, especially in the political climates that we have in some ways, is that people think that, somehow national identity is in conflict with a global citizenship identity. But cosmopolitanism tells us that we can have a sense of belonging at multiple levels at the same time. And it's really important that we remember that. I mean, I live in a small regional town in Queensland, and I've lived here now for over 10 years. And I feel, they joke with me that I had to marry in to get my passport, because you really have to be 5th generation here before you're a local. But I will say, I'm from Bundaberg. It's a part of my identity. But I will also say my connection to country is that I was born in the state of Tasmania, and so I feel Tasmanian. I feel Australian. But if you ever ask me what sort of an educator I am, I will immediately say I'm a global educator. And I think that comes back to that point that somebody brought up there, was that generosity. It was you, Luce, I think, that professional generosity is, I find that because people identify at these multiple levels, if I work with people in this field, one, they're passionate about it, but two, they're excited to connect with you, whether it's 2 local schools working together in the little area of Bundaberg, or whether it is a beautiful conference like this. People are passionate and excited to work together. Yes, Libby, you had a comment.
Yeah, I was just going to add a little bit more about cosmopolitanism, because I see Lucy's just made a couple of comments about that, and I'm just going to give a little shout out for a book called Cosmopolitanism. It's by Kwame Anthony Appiah, who's a professor at NYU at the moment, I think. But it's a short read, but it's really relevant to this. And I really like the philosophical underpinnings of it. And he talks about, which I draw from a lot in my work, it will have already been reflected in things I've said, the idea of universality plus difference. And that is that recognition that there is a kind of a moral universalism. There is stuff that we all agree on, but plus difference. And just because we're different doesn't mean we can't learn to get along. So it's about sort of, a bunch of strangers in the world learning to live well together, really. But it's if you can get hold of that book, it's well worth a read.
And that's one thing I think is interesting to note here is that in the comments popping up in the chat here, Libby, nobody said they've got to be the same sort of person as me. That's not what we're looking for. And in fact, we're often looking for somebody who is different to me, but like-minded in these universal values. I had the honour this last week of presenting at the Indonesian Civic Education Conference. And because I was preparing for that, I was looking at their wonderful foundational work that they have called Pancasila, which some of you might know of, which is effectively the principles of government or principles of coming together of Indonesia. Now, those of you that don't know the country, you cannot have a more diverse country with a more multitude of languages and cultures. But Pancasila is all about unity in diversity. And again, I was showing to them, because they have that really strong national underpinning and how those values align with the values of global citizenship, global education, universality. So again, there's so many beautiful examples of how we can work together in our diverse communities. We'll pop on to the next slide, Libby.
Yep. Okay.
Okay, so we've thought about the other person. We've thought about what we're looking for. But we know, as you see from Libby's diagram, as we know from the foundational underpinnings of global citizenship, yes, absolutely, we have an identity with it, we connect within it, but we also have responsibilities. It's very hard to say I'm an active global citizen if you don't really get out and do anything. So what is your responsibility? If you partner up, and whether it's that beautiful partners you were talking about, somebody was partnering up with their husband, or the people you had in your canoes, or it's an institution you work with, or you might be thinking in terms of I'm at a university and I have to work with policymakers. Whoever the partner is in your head, what is your responsibility in this work? What do you need to bring to this partnership to make it work? So, I know, Libby, you're great at forming these partnerships. When you were working with Jean, what did you feel was your responsibility as that global critical?
So my first responsibility, I thought, was to listen, to get to know the other partners in there, to hear their perspectives. And I found it really fascinating because we were listening to kind of challenges and contexts going on in Europe that actually weren't quite going on for us here at the time, although some of them are now. But then I also, once I sort of, and I think some of the other global critical friends felt the same, but once we had listened a bit to what was going on there, we gained enough confidence to offer our own perspectives, and we realised how important they are. So, I brought up, I talked about ethics and Indigenous perspectives, and those things got included, and that was really nice to see. So it was, so I guess the short answer to that is listen, but also speak. But also offer your perspective.
I think that's an enormously important point, Libby. We don't have to sit and always agree with our partners. That's one of those wonderful parts of diversity as well, is that we need to ensure that if we think we're heading in the wrong direction, and that's where the critical friend comes into play, sometimes you do have to step up at that wee bit. And I'm just seeing here Susanna's picked up on that critical point too. Critical thinking and harmony. I love that. Harmony with people and planet. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah,
and
nice.
Absolutely, Susanna. We talk about, and as a teacher educator, obviously I'm always having conversations with my students saying, why are you doing this? What is it you're trying to achieve within your classrooms, within your schools? What is the purpose of this thing we call education? And absolutely, we need to be able to make people literate and numerate because they can't engage in the world. But as a partner in a teacher education sense, if I'm not challenging my students to think what sort of teacher they want to be, what sort of students they want to produce, then I'm not really working, I'm not really doing my best for them. I love that. Talking literacy.
Yeah.
Responsibility is to spell responsibility correctly. I love it. In the nature of my work, I can't tell you how many times I have to write Indigenous, and there's something in my brain gets it wrong every single time. I get that. Listen, yeah, I'm just looking here. Complete the tasks I've been getting. That's a really important one. Yes. Working collaboratively, but also being the person that actually does what they said they would do. That's enormously important.
It is. Actually, one of the many partnerships I've had is with an organisation that's no longer funded, so it barely sort of exists, but called the Alliance of Sustainable and Responsible and Sustainable Societies. And it's global, but it was French based, and there was a nice play on the word responsible, because in French it's responsable, and so it was the emphasis was put on the able bit in this, using that spelling. So it was really really emphasizing that ability to act as part of responsibility.
Absolutely. I think sometimes when we're, whether it's global citizenship or whatever, we kind of forget that component. So we talk about the knowledge, we talk about the cognitive and the social emotional skills, we talk about the values and attitudes. But as you say, if you don't actually act, if you don't actually do something, Libby, then we're not going to achieve. I don't know whether you heard, but at the moment, SDG 4, based on the current monitoring, remembering this is supposed to be the 2030 agenda, at the moment we're on track to achieve SDG 4 by 2062. 2062. I hope you're all way younger than me, but oh my goodness, if I'm still teaching is 2062. But yeah. What's the
amazing? It's shocking. Can I just say something else about the responsible thing too? So this is going to change in your context and your language as well. Language is a treasure and of our cultural heritage. And in these three tohu here, kaitiakitanga, which is the te reo Māori word that's put there for responsibility, really has a bigger part of that meaning, perhaps, is stewardship. And it's really about the idea that actually nobody owns land or any natural treasures. They're simply here for us to take care of or be guardians of, that were handed from our ancestors and to be protected and guarded for our future generations.
Absolutely. And I think that's where the open dialogue that you're talking about, Maria, comes into play, because speaking with our First Nations people, speaking with people of a different culture or a different religion, that's that open dialogue, that non-judgmental dialogue, and creating those safe, or sometimes we talk about brave spaces, where you can have that open dialogue. People feel safe to be themselves, express their views, but can also debate those conversations in a collaborative atmosphere. Thank you so much for all those suggestions. I'm just conscious of time, so we might have to pop on to the next slide, Libby.
So what we're going to do is as we draw this to a conclusion quite soon, is that really to emphasise the power of partnerships and the value of it, and to connect with the complexity of what all of this is. We live in an enormously complex, rapidly changing world that with so many competing interests, and not just competing interests, but also complementary interests and capabilities and solutions. So this is what we're about here, is building an ecosystem. So I actually really like the language of global citizenship in education, because I think it puts it firmly in the person. It's in me. I am the global citizen. I'm the one who's connected. I'm the one who's got some responsibilities. But as Karena has also mentioned, there are lots of other names you can give this. It doesn't really matter. We're all talking about the same kind of principles. Where we're going is the same direction. What we want is to educate people to step up with courage and confidence and responsibility for a better world that is just, inclusive, sustainable, and peaceful, actually, number one. And so it is an ecosystem of connected interests, capabilities, and solutions. And so when we think, if you say something like global citizenship education, then people might think, well, what about peace education? What about climate education? What about sustainable development education? Well, actually, it's all there. It's all connected. And all the different kind of groups and methodologies and everything is all part of that. So this is a growing thing and something that we would really invite partners and friends to join us in this journey in any way that they would like, and to stay connected. Karena, is there anything else you'd like to say about this ecosystem idea?
No, I think as Maria's saying, I love this ecosystem because I think sometimes it's very tricky to try and explain what we do. I get pulled up all the time with people saying, yes, but what actually do you do? And I did a presentation to my own school. Now, remembering I've worked there for 10 years, I've been playing in this space for the full 10 years, did a presentation to my own school a month ago, and they went, oh, that's what you do, so that's why I love this. I love this framework. And I think also when you look at the UNESCO document, you will see why its actual name is about a paragraph long, because it was trying to explain, it was all of the countries signing a document and trying to explain just how complex this system that we work in. So we throw terms on top of it called global citizenship education, global competence, or whatever, but we do it in a way that we're saying, but if you see yourself as a peace educator, or you see yourself as particularly working in education for sustainable development, please don't feel like you're not part of that conversation, because that's what this ecosystem's all about. We better pop to our last slide and just.
This does have to be inclusive. It's got to be across sector, all voices. So yeah, please. Last slide is going to give you a little bit of how to. Yes. Big thank you, ngā mihi nui, and some contact information for us.
Yes, so as I say, Libby and I love to work with other people. That's literally what both of our work, Libby in the not-for-profit sector, me in the university sector. And if you look at the mission statements of our respective research clusters or organisations, you will see that partnerships working together to promote and advocate for and be practical in our implementation of this ecosystem that we call global citizenship education. That's what we're all about. So hopefully you can see that clear enough. There's our email addresses if you would like to reach out about anything that we've talked about today, or you'd like copies of some of the documents we've talked about, that sort of thing. Other than that, thank you for being our partners today. We've loved the conversations with you, and we look forward to the possibility of connecting with you all in other ways on other occasions. And thank you again to the wonderful organisers of this this gathering. I think this is the third time I've been involved in the conference, and Lucy and all the team, Mohammed, I can see you there. We're really grateful to you for all the organisational work that goes on in the background. We know it's a huge task, and we look forward to the possibility of this particular forum continuing well into the future.
It is going to continue because I'm working with the Charter for Compassion, and they are funding half of the platform for next year. So hopefully, I want to connect you to them too, because I think you'd find their executive director to be awesome. I know we tried in the past, and we'll figure it out again. But they're going to help with the cost of it because it's not cheap. And so I'm really grateful for that. And so there will be a GLOW 2025. And, every year we learn from it and, how to kind of fine tune things. So I'm looking forward to, starting earlier in the planning process and all that. Anyway, thank you for coming, ladies. I love hearing what you're talking about. I think so highly of Jean too, which has been an influence in our work as well, because we got to go to a couple of their conferences a while back. And I think, my takeaway from their work too is that there's nobody really kind of convening the global North and South around this for practitioners and the academics and everybody to kind of connect. And it sounds like they're starting to kind of reach out to other areas. It's not just Europe. And they, and Europe has been doing global citizenship type of work for a lot longer than everybody else, it seems. And there are lessons to be learned there. And so I love their declaration, and everybody should take a look at it and use that as a starting point.
Definitely. And the Global Critical Friends work has, in particular, I think it would be true to say that Asia Pacific has taken the lead in terms of where it's gone next, but there's also quite a bit of activity in the Latin America. And Africa.
That's exciting. Can't wait to hear more about that. Next year, we'll have to get representatives from every region.
We'll fill you in on that from Jean. She'll be great.
That sounds good. All right. It's 10:02 at the top of the hour. We have more sessions. We're getting towards the end. We're not quite there yet. So hang with us and join us for the next set of sessions in the stages and in the sessions in the conference platform. And thanks again to Libby and Karena for sharing their knowledge with us. We really appreciate it. Have a good day wherever you are, everyone. And we'll see you at the next event.